So how to move from fire drills to strategic work. Now, this is an important topic to me because someone in the class I was teaching at Pavilion in May, someone was asking, this is all great stuff, but all I have is fire drills. Do I just drop the fire drills? I'm like, no, don't do that. She's like, well, how do I get from fire drills to actually doing this strategic work? And I'm like, love that question. So I decided, let's dig in. So Cynthia Silva is always a fantastic partner in crime on this. Cynthia, why don't you just introduce yourself for anybody who hasn't met you yet?
Yeah, of course. Hey there. Cynthia Silva here, customer success enthusiast, CX Exchange member, and really excited to talk about this because I've spent most of my career on the sales side and the front side. So there was many fire drills trying to close deals, but on the post-sale motion, it becomes even more critical, as we know, because especially now with this big focus on retention and expansion for existing customers, that's the cheapest way that companies are looking to expand their revenue. Being able to kind of put those, fire drills and solve those problems is critical. But then, how do you plan for the future? I mean, I know that's hard with fire drills, but we tried to unpack that today. So I think it's going to be a great conversation.
All right. And as usual, this is a discussion. It's always meant to be a discussion. So whether you have a question or a comment, all of these are contributions, and we've got nothing to do. We can just go home if you don't have a contribution. So, all right, let's, okay. So first of all, in terms of, this topic here, and I am recording, right? Just checking.
Oh, I don't know. Are you?
Am I recording?
It's record on?
Yes, you are.
I don't, oh, it
Yeah,
is. Okay.
it says.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, good.
There we go.
All right, just checking. Sometimes I go through everything and then like, oh, forgot to hit record. Okay, so so when you're moving from fire drills to strategic work, then like basically it is a way of life, right? We do have fire drills. They are going to happen, usually Friday at 5 o'clock, right? And so fire drills happen, but but pretending that they don't, or pretending that it's okay and ignoring that you're sitting in a room full of fire is not necessarily going to help you, right? You want to actually address it. If you don't, what happens is just basically fire begets more fire. And that's the same with fire drills. So what's going to happen is you're just going to continue to have more and more and bigger fire drills. So let's first talk about how to get out of fire drill mode, right? So, you have things that you've planned for the day, and then there's what comes up, right? So do you need to do those, all of the fire drills? You want to evaluate them, right? You want to assess what level of fire drill it is, what is necessary compared to what's planned. Because if you don't get to some of that planned work, that's going to ensure that you're always in fire drill mode, right? So we wanted to address then for CSMs and CS leaders, sort of some of the differences in what you're looking at, because the scope does make a difference. And for CSMs, then you're dealing with an individual situation, and you're going to look at sort of the severity of the issue, right? And how much of it is something you can address on your own versus when you need to escalate it, right? And sometimes it's more of a fire drill for the customer than it is, say, for you. It might be more impactful. Like when I was in entertainment tech, there was a particular video file that didn't get out to the largest cable customer that we were sending out on behalf of a medium-sized, maybe smallish content provider. And this was not such a big deal to us. right? It just wasn't. And so when I was trying to get the attention of my operations leader and say, no, come on, this is a really big deal. She's like, what? This is just not a big deal. It's one file. We got all the others, thousands and thousands we got through. Okay. Well, they had like, I don't know, a $500,000 ad against it, which was a big part of their budget. And this was where all of their views were going to be coming from. And their ad budget, their advertising campaign started that day and it hadn't shown up yet. So this was a huge, huge deal to them, right? So that's something you want to take a look at is, what is it for the customer versus, and also what is it for you? And sometimes it's a bigger deal for you, sometimes it's a bigger deal for them, but you want to evaluate that. And then make certain that you're working through the situation and then you have an opportunity to do a postmortem on it as well, right? If you find that you have a lot of fire drills though, I think you want to take a look at what are the type, the frequency, and the criticality. Is there some kind of trend? Maybe you're able to handle all of these and you're just kind of going through them. But if you take a look at how you're spending your time, maybe you're dealing with a lot of fire drills and maybe there's a way to turn it into some sort of preventative work instead, right? Or maybe if you share that with your team, there's other CSMs who are either dealing with it and also have that same issue, or they found a way to prevent it that you didn't know about. And it's only through communicating with your team members and your manager about this trend that you're seeing, that you can start to evaluate some of these things. Cinthia, I know you wanted to weigh in on some of this as well.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really good breakdown there, Jan, because I think everyone's faced that. Again, you're going about your business, everything's all good until it's not, right? Something goes wrong and you're just trying to figure out how to solve the problem. I think also too, like resolving the fire drills, those issues, and then looking at it, like looking for those trends and then trying to be like forward thinking on how to potentially avoid them in the future is absolutely critical. And I think also too, this is to me like screams, if you've already laid the groundwork with your internal partners in the past to kind of have those partnerships, resolving those fire drills are going to be much, much smoother. So just so if you haven't already established good relationships with the product team, the sales team, the ops team, whatever it might be, it takes longer because you're just trying to scramble to get things done, as opposed to having those kind of relationships to help establish that or get those issues resolved quickly. It becomes more of a we versus I, and that whole silo mentality. So that's one of the things I think this scenario typically screams out for me.
Yeah. And now as a CS leader, you might want to, you may feel like, can the CSM deal with that? Do I really have to get involved? Does it have to be escalated up to me? This is killing, my schedule. This is, all the other things I need to do, right? But at the same time, if as a CS leader, if you have something that is impacting one of your major accounts or, or can snowball or I guess fireball into a bigger issue, if you don't address it, then what's going to happen is that's how you end up getting fired, right? Because it's seen as you're not in control of your CS program. You don't have a handle on it. So, you do need to be engaged in the fire drills, but to what end, right? Like you also need to think about, if you have fire drills and you don't have a postmortem, and try to identify what was the cause and what could prevent it, not in a blaming way, but in a causation to understand prevention, then you're going to get into trouble. Right? You're going to have your own challenges. You also, from your vantage point, because you're working across all your different teams, you're working across, teams within the company, you might have a different vantage point and understand how it connects in a different way. So actually having your eyes and ears on something can be really useful in understanding the trends and the underpinning problems that it's connected to. So, it is useful if you pay attention to these things. But if you find that you have a lot of fire drills and you're trying to figure out how to address them in a way to then get to the preventative work, first, you would probably want to build a playbook for the common fire drills, just so you have an interim measure and so that your team doesn't have to come knocking on your door, so to speak, at every single issue, so that at least they understand this is how I put the tourniquet on. And then I'm going to keep that tourniquet on, but until we can get to a better place, right? And then you want to start thinking about what the fix-it plan is going to be, or there's probably a more eloquent way to put it, but I was trying to just write this up quickly. And so, what is going to be your fix-it plan for most critical or frequent fire drills? So you do need to understand, you need to look at those trends and understand what's going to have the greatest impact on your customers, what's going to have the greatest impact on your company. Right? Is there a dollar component? Is there a frequency? How much time? Like, I know that there's a company where literally they bring together the executive team for a weekly meeting to address a particular problem client right now, right? They're doing this on a weekly basis. How much money is being spent in the company by having all those executives there, right? So if you can identify what the fix-it plan is, then you can eliminate that meeting. So you can weigh the cost of fixing versus the cost of a continued executive weekly meeting to address your most important account, right? And then that's a way of sort of shining a light on, hey, let's get into a different mode here, and taking a leadership role that everyone else can appreciate you're taking, right? As a way to kind of get to that preventative work. Any comments before we move on to how to prevent fire drills?
Well, I mean, really quick from my side, I would say, like, there's two things here. Like, as a leader, obviously you want to, if necessary, help your CSMs resolve the issue at hand. But really, it's about using your clout to plan for the future, right? So, and again, I think the postmortem becomes very, very important here, where you identify what the issue is without pointing fingers, right? That gets you absolutely nowhere. And if you don't have the clout with your internal partners, then that's a light as a leader. You need to shine on yourself. You need to be building those relationships yourself, because sometimes, especially if you're noticing that these issues are happening, they're leading to signs of different bigger problems. You sort of need that clout to bring to your executive leadership to get that buy-in there and drive that message down, because we know, like, if it's just one voice, not everybody's going to listen. But if it's an executive voice or multiple peers at that leadership level, it's much stronger. You're going to get the buy-in and hopefully avoid the issues in the future.
Any other thoughts or comments or questions here? I know that there's folks in this group here who've been through plenty of fire drills.
Yeah, I can offer a quick one. This is Rumiana here. In my experience, I found that the CSMs have always been empowered and expected to take that step and proactive approach. And I just want to say I totally agree with the point and importance of having your foundation of relationships, whether it's the support team and product. I find these are the most sort of fire drill allies, or who should really get involved. And the way I like to structure when I take the proactive approach on fixing the postmortem is a structural improvement versus a patch. So maybe we agree on a patch, but we all agree this is a patch with a limited runway, and it will break after that. We don't want that. And let's set up a project, maybe there's a sponsor, etc., that we can approach the structural improvement.
Great. I love too the idea that there's a sponsor, right? So that there is somebody who is has that responsibility at the executive level or leadership level that can also then, as you're trying to resolve something, can potentially give more resources to you or other things, or communicate back in ways that you might need. Yeah.
And further, just to the kind of the structural approach, I think the 80-20 rule in SaaS is very valid. We will find that a large percentage of the fire drills are really caused by one or two things. Maybe it's stability of the product, and really things that keep happening over and over.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love the 80-20. Yeah. Any other thoughts? I see a lot of nodding heads.
Yeah, I have a thought. So Jan, I know that you were mentioning about having the senior leaders give you extra resources. It's been in my experience that you're the resource and you get to do the extra work to fix it. And that's usually how I got it done. Basically, my manager was make it happen. And so that's what I did. So I was like, well, great. Where are these extra resources? Oh, I'm looking at it in the mirror.
Well, I mean, that can be true. That can be true. I find though too, like if it gets to say engineering being, you know, where you need to have something addressed by engineering, or you need some perspective or information that maybe the CTO or VP of engineering or somebody has. If
Sure, in that
if some-
perspective, if
yeah,
it's just actual work,
right.
they say
Well,
you signed up for it. Enjoy.
right. Well, and just like Danny McCoy was sharing earlier, when all of a sudden you get to step up unexpectedly, there are some opportunities in that as well, right? Yeah.
Yes, more work.
More work, but maybe more insights and more skills built.
Yeah.
Yeah, but more work, yes, certainly. All right. Okay, so
Oh, Jan.
then, yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's Jay. One very, very quick question. Either as a CSM or as a CS leader, how do you how do you make what is one good way to make a case to your boss that taking the time to do the after action reviews or postmortems, to make the playbooks, to present the value add of the fix it plan. What's a good way to make that case to senior leadership when they're like, you know, we don't have time, like we got to fix a problem and then we're going to fix the next problem and we just got to keep on going.
Well, you know, that's the kind of thing that usually where, and I also see Megan Carlson Kladakis in the chat is also saying, well, what happens if like there's 90% of the fire drills, you know, from sales or something, and sales doesn't want to cooperate, or, you know, your executive leadership team is not looking at the long view, they're just going from tourniquet to tourniquet, right? And so when that sort of thing happens, again, I would go back to the example that I gave earlier of calculating the cost of a weekly executive meeting, right? Because all they're doing is saying, well, we all have to, you know, swarm on this. So we're all going to swarm on this until we all feel better. It's like, okay, are you actually fixing anything though? Like doing this swarm meeting is very, very expensive. What's actually getting fixed? And so what I always do is I like to go back to the economics of it and to go back and show this is how much it's costing us. This is how much it cost us for the engineering team, which is very expensive to work on this. This is how much time it spent, you know, for all of the additional meetings. And, you know, you can approximate who all's in, you know, is in the meeting and that sort of thing, right? So you kind of go through and talk about if you don't, maybe you don't know, I don't know what engineering makes or whatever, like fine, just say senior engineering resource, you know, however many hours, you know, support resource, how many hours, you know, CFO, how many hours, you know, like all of this stuff, like just all the different levels, and you can add up the hours and kind of like the category of who they are. They'll get it. They can add that up in their heads, right? And show the cost of not fixing it. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jen. And I think you could even make it even more simple. I think going back, you know, bringing data and just saying how many customers have these types of problems affected if sales is the source of them all, and then what's the churn risk of them all, and then just tie that together, because everybody loves to say they don't have data, and we all know that it's very tricky from one company to the next. But you can assess what the NRR of your clients, what that worth is, what the churn risk, especially in this current environment, which we know all of a sudden retention has become important. Retention should have always been important, right? And expanding for the, you know, an existing customer. That's what sales, and especially if you go around the table with sales, with leadership, still not blaming, but just saying like, we're really worried. These mistakes keep happening. What's the root cause? So people sort of have to own it. And here's the churn risk, you know, based on like these things happening continuously.
No.
Dollars and cents.
And I think that kind of gets us into how to prevent the fire drills. It's the same sort of thing about how to get them to change their focus, right? So if sales is saying, oh, whatever, we're bringing them in, it's your job to keep them, right? You know, you say it's a churn risk. Well, that's your problem. Why aren't you keeping them? You know, what are you doing wrong? Right? So they're still gonna, you know, point the finger over at you. Think about then, you know, really what is the cost, right? And if you show them what the cost is, and if the cost is greater than what they're bringing in, so they might say, well, I brought in, you know, $10 million of sales. I'm the hero. Say, yes, but it costs $100 million to support that client. Then we actually lose 90 million. You're not the hero, right? So it's that sort of thing. Like, do we actually want to bring that customer in, or do we want to fire them? Right? So you just want to show what the real cost is. So when you're looking at this for CSMs, when BOB is a book of business. So you want to take a look at your book of business financials. Now, Erica Villarreal has a great spreadsheet that she's given, and I'll have to dig that up and share that with you later. But even still, when you're looking at even the example that she has, that is set up for her economics. You need to take a look at what are your economics? How are you on MRR or ARR? Do you have multi-year contracts? You know, all of those things can vary in terms of how you analyze your book of business financials, but have some way to analyze those financials so that you understand who your most valuable client is versus your least valuable client. Just for point of reference, because if your least valuable client is the one who's spending, taking 80% of your time, then you want to take a look at that. Or if they're doing 80% of the fire drills, then you know that they're not paying for the amount of fire drills that they're causing, right? Things like that you want to be able to analyze, right? You want to assess your account health. Now, this is way beyond just assessing. The last time I talked to my champion, they just came back from vacation and they were happy, right? That is not account health, right? What you want to take a look at for account health, and we actually in 2 weeks, the customer ROI calculator would be one way to assess it. But you want to take a look at how, what is the actual health of your accounts? How likely are they to renew? How much time did they spend in onboarding? How successful was that? Are they actually using your product? There might be various ways that you would account for that. You should take a look at that. So through that, then you'll prioritize your accounts, right? You want to be sure that you're setting aside in your schedule, you have time set for email follow-up. Sometimes CSMs will spend all of their time doing support work. Now, if support is one of your hats you're literally wearing and you're responsible for support, that's one thing. But if you have a support team, spending time on support is busy work, and it actually is taking you away from the important work. Right. And so what you want to do is make certain that you don't respond to your customer very quickly as a strategy, because if you take at least 24 hours and they need help with something from support right away, they're going to learn, oh, I should go to support for that. I'll get the immediate help that I need. Right. Things like that. You want to be sure that you're setting boundaries and expectations, both with other teams as well as with your customers. And you want to be sure that for those times when you do have fire drills, or any time that you're kind of working on projects, that you're setting up yourself for success by having strong internal partnerships. So that's what you will be thinking through and trying to set up as your preventative work as a CSM. Any thoughts or comments on that? I know, Cinthia, you've got a lot of comments on this too.
Yeah, I do. I think honestly, you broke it down really, really well, Jan. But I think one of the things, if I kind of like move back and do that 30,000-foot view, when I look at the first one, analyze book of business financials, sometimes going back to kind of like, sales is causing a lot of this. Sometimes it's because they're selling to the wrong the wrong customers, right? And so this sort of analysis can help you identify, do you realize that like the last 10 fire drills have been on our smallest clients? They're the noisiest. And if we look closer, they're not just paying the least, but they really aren't right for our solution. We're going to keep having these problems. So that's why like this sort of like in-depth review can really help. In certain instances, that might be the case where like if we're getting away from the ICP, the ideal customer profile, the best CSM in the world is not going to be able to, you know, like avoid the churn, or it's going to be a lot of fire drills that maybe from that 30,000 foot view, like you can start saying, or should we be selling this? Now that is a loaded conversation, but I still think it's something that makes you more of a strategic CSM and things you should be looking at. And, or are there ways that we can be more strategic about how to address those if they are, you know, like more customers that could grow with us potentially. But I like this review because I think it's super in-depth, and these are ways for CSMs to be more strategic and more proactive.
Yeah. Now, when you're thinking about it from the CS leader perspective, then this is where, again, talking about 30,000 foot view, this is, you know, removed another, so we call it 50,000 foot, but you want to be sure that you have built relationships with other team leads and other executive relationships. You want to be sure that you have those in place. You want to think about in your customers, overall, your customer book of business, who those key decision makers are, right? You want to have an established relationship there for your key accounts, because if a fire drill comes about and they're meeting you for the first time, they're not nearly as trusting of you as if you already have an established relationship. If you come to them and it's not the first time they've ever heard from you, then they're going to say, "Oh, Jan, I can't believe what's going on. Tell me what's the inside, you know, track on this," right? Whereas if all of a sudden you show up and you say, "Hi, I'm Jan Young, and yes, there's a major fire drill. Let me explain to you how we messed up so much." They're looking at you a little suspect, and you have to prove yourself with every statement. And anytime you say something just a little awry, then, you know, or awry, or whatever that word is, you know, they're going to be evaluating if you can say awry or awry, right? So there you go. Then think about too, how are you going to evaluate your customer base? What are the financials? Take a look at your sort of bottoms up account-based financials. Sometimes as leaders, we only look at the top level, and you want to be sure that you understand what's happening bottoms up and top down. Hey, Stan.
Well, hello. Thank you, Jan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Some of the thoughts that come to mind is the transition from the sale into CSM, and the maybe not or what's prior to the onboarding, but also how, in the strategy point of view, triage levels. Well, maybe we're not prepared. We're prepared for the fire, knowing, okay, how serious is the fire? Is there smoke now, or is it an inferno? Well, one other thing that comes to mind, our workflow, studying your workflow within the organization as well. I think the financials are very important in identifying the value. That transition to now, okay, now they're under our wing. What workflows do we have in place prior to them coming under our wing? And what do we do with them currently? You know we all have those systems, but I thought I'd put a little plug for that as well.
I love that, Stan, because it's really true, right? When you're taking a look at what the workflows are with that customer journey, right? For us, it's an internal workflow. For the customer, it's their experience and their journey and what they're doing on their side. And by understanding those things, both the internal workflows as well as the customer journey, then we can also start to evaluate where some of these breakdowns are taking place, right? And especially if we've evaluated what are our sort of the 80-20 rule that was mentioned earlier, kind of where the 80% of the problems coming from that are probably rooted in sort of 20% of the issues, then we can certainly have a smart way of attacking it. Hey, Ramanya.
Hi, Jen. Yeah, can you just explain it again, the point about pulling together the customer-based financials, bottom-ups versus down? I didn't understand that.
Sure, yeah. So sometimes if you're just looking at your overall amount, say we have 85 million in accounts. We have a 15% margin on it or 30% margin on it or whatever it is, technically you want to get to 65 to 80% margin on it in terms of your cost to the other. But anyway, there are numbers. Sorry, I'm getting stuck now in overall numbers, but there are numbers overall that you might look at, that your CFO might look at, right? Or that your CEO might look at, and you're looking at sort of top down numbers. This is what our ARR is, the way that investors look at it. This is our ARR overall. They're not looking at what each account contributes both to the revenue and to the cost. They're just looking at overall, right?
Yeah.
So if you have in your bank account, you have an overall amount that is, deposit and debit, right? And you just would look at that at the end of the month and you would say, that's the overall amount. Versus if you look at each individual transaction, that's sort of looking at each account. And the reason why that sort of bottoms up is that by looking at each account, both the revenue and the costs, when you look at what that adds up into, then that becomes a more meaningful number when you get to that 85 million or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And potential for additional users. For example, if you're basing on licenses or something, and if they have a lot of users or adding regularly, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's through looking at the details that add up into that bigger number that then you can see where you have opportunities, where you have challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
And then the other thing that's actually preventative is when you segment and tier your customer base, then you can start to take a look at what the behavior is, what the goals are of your customers, where you're trying to actually lead them to. You can be more proactive about that. If you have a tiering that is also added into that, that is then who is actually bringing in the most revenue per their costs, or the least amount of revenue, and how you can financially afford to work with those customers. At what point do you break even? Things like that. You also, as I was mentioning, you want to document those customer journeys, because your segments will have different journeys. They're using potentially different products if you have more than one product, or they have different goals in using your products, things like that, that literally put them on a different path, a different journey from another segment. All of these things then can allow you to be more proactive in how you guide your customers through, so that they don't get sort of jammed up and stuck in different places in the journey and never progressing, never fully adopting, never fully optimizing your product. So you have to be a little prescriptive and know where you're guiding them in order to know when they're getting off track. So you have to build that track for them. And then otherwise, from that, you're going to identify key activities for their success, so that if they are actually reaching that or not, if they're meeting those points in time. If there's certain activities that they should do by a certain timeline, and if they're not doing that, then that they're off track as well. Okay, so that's basically it. We're way over today. So let's go.
This resonated with the crew, Jan. Clearly.
And I'm glad we had a lot of participation throughout, and both questions and comments. It was very, very constructive. We have two questions for the breakouts. Let's go to breakouts for about 12 minutes. Welcome back.
Sorry, I missed that discussion, but just wanted to come back to what we were talking about. It was very, very helpful.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear it. So how did that discussion go for you all then?
I nominated Tammy, but I need to say it because it was so good. I was just such great women. Men could too, but we had women. So Lori had a situation where she said, I had this one client and it wasn't going well. And Lori, you're free to to censor what I said, but it didn't go well. And Julie said, hey, Lori, are there other people that are doing what you're doing who have customers with the same situation? And so in doing that, getting the group together, coming up with an answer, breaking down silos, and learning how you compose what's wrong with the customer, what's happening with the customer, how can we make that situation so that solving their problem is in everybody else's interest. So it was great group.
Yep. Lori, Tammy, yeah, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it was super helpful. I was mentioning how my client was the black sheep, and they'd been a client for many years, and over the years, no one wanted to deal with them, a lot because of personalities, but a lot because of, they would claim fires and it wasn't really a fire. So over time, you never really knew what was important and what wasn't with them, but very good feedback. And I appreciate, thanks for the summary, Pam. That was great.
Oh, that's great. When I was in IC, I had a client that would always want to blame whenever there was an issue, and she would always point the finger at us. And then so often it wasn't actually us. And, it was that same sort of feeling like, she's calling, it can't be good. And this is back in the days when we used to actually go there in person, right? I made a point then of kind of walking throughout the building and talking to all the different folks, getting all their different perspectives. But then I said, I'd love to see a day in the life. How do you manage your process? What is your workflow? When she showed it to me, it turns out everything was manual and on this Excel spreadsheet. And they were dealing with thousands and thousands of video files. And that's why she was always so stressed out. And that's why she always felt like she had to be so buttoned up. And that's why she always felt like she was buttoned up and it couldn't be them because she was so buttoned up. And that's why she would always point the finger at us. And once I understood that and I could share that with our operations team, it kind of changed things, if nothing else, just how I felt. Sometimes that just helps. I don't know if that helps you, Lori, but anyway. Any other thoughts to share as we are now at 10 o'clock Pacific and it's time to head out? Any last, yes, Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. You might kill me, but I ended our breakout room conversation with how do we know what counts as a fire? Because I feel, in my judgment, I think what a fire in one place may not be a fire in another place, and it can often be easy and almost like drama. It helps us look and feel like we're contributing when we're putting out fires, even though it might not really, it's a small flame, not like the building's burning. So maybe just wanted to leave folks with that is as you're preparing for your fire drills, is it a real fire?
Right. That's
or
great.
how hot is it?
How hot? Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your time and fitting us into your day. Want to do this 2 more times this week, this month. And so I'll see you same time, same bat channel next week, 9 a.m. It should be a great topic with Divya. We're talking about how to manage your time so that you can really get the fulfillment for your health, wealth, and your, I forget what the other one, but anyway, it's holistic. It's a big approach to all the things you want in your life, and it should be a great session. So, all right, we'll see you
everybody
next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.